Morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Today is Sunday, February 5th, 2023. I have a feeling there's new people. If you haven't done this class, we're not doing a review this week. We don't do them every week because, a lot of you are consistent and we don't want to keep going over the same thing. So if you don't know the technique, you can go to the YouTube. Michael, Meditation with Michael Imperioli on YouTube, and you look at the first class from this year. It was in January 2023. It has a detailed review of the basic technique. I'll try to guide you a little bit, but it's not going to be, a very thorough review of the technique. We're going to do a little bit different today. We're going to talk a little bit first, then meditate, then do questions. Okay? There's a Q&A function in the Zoom toolbar, and you can ask questions on meditation or whatever topics we discuss, and we'll try to answer them if we can. Let's start by making our setting our intention and making aspiration by saying the Four Immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering
and the causes of
suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. So I want to briefly talk about, we talk about when this class shifted from just a secular meditation class to a meditation class with some Dharma talk. We asked our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, if that was okay because so many of you were expressing interest in Buddha Dharma. And he said, that's okay as long as you keep the focus on mind, because Buddha is not the name of a man. Buddha is the name of our mind, which really refers to all sentient beings' innate, unchangeable, beginningless, endless, true nature, which is enlightened. Buddha nature, enlightenment, is already within. You can't get rid of it. You can't damage it. You can't, lessen it. You can't make it greater. What you can do is work on removing, clearing away the obscurations, that especially the afflictive emotions, the habitual patterns, and the karmic imprints, that prevent us from realizing that, right? And there's, basically the Dharma is the methods in which we go about doing that, right? Meditation is a method by which we start to become familiar with how our mind works. If Buddha is the name of mind, we're becoming familiar with how the mind works. Basically, we're becoming familiar with who we are and what we do, what we think about, how we interact, how we react to others, to the world. And meditation is a way of us becoming and we have to, in order to, use these methods and progress on this path, we have to become very, very, very brutally honest with ourselves and what we're doing. One of the great, great teachers is our own defects and our own errors, our own shortcomings, our negative emotions, acting out of our negative emotions and seeing them, seeing that we've done them, seeing why we did them, and then really coming to terms with, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I was at today. I reacted negatively because my ego was threatened, because I felt that I shouldn't have to wait online, that I should be able to just waltz in and, have my way, not be patient, not be understanding. When our vision gets limited and we just focus on ourselves and our own needs and our own expectations rather than, taking the wider view of what's really going on and everyone else there. And you admit to yourself what you did and you understand why you did it. And you realize that that kind of behavior is this default mechanism that's you've been operating through for many years and perhaps many lifetimes, and you make a resolve saying, I don't want to behave in this way. And the only way that we see this, seeing it first of all is a good thing, because if you see it and you understand it and you realize it, then you can change it. Because then when you're in the same situation, when the external stimuli, affects you in the same way and kind of pushes you to react and act in the same way, you can be reminded of the last time you did it, and the negative results of that, and your feelings about that, and your desire to not behave that way. That's how we learn. We don't learn from smooth sailing, really. We learn from our mistakes, we learn from our shortcomings, we learn from our failures. And I think it's really important to understand that, and at the same time not carry the guilt and the burden of making these mistakes, not being so hard on ourselves where it becomes this other afflictive emotion of guilt, and I'll never do it, and I'm a bad person, and I'm this and that. It doesn't justify what we're doing. It doesn't say it's okay that what we did. It's just saying we did it. I understand why I did it, but I don't want to do it again. And I think it's really important. I think a lot of people make this weird assumption that once you decide you're a Buddhist, you become this flawless individual because now you've heard the words of the Dharma and you're going to adhere with perfection because you know that. And people are also at the same, other people will be quick to judge you and say, wow, well, you must be a bad Buddhist or something because you just, behaved so impatiently or out of anger or something like that. And it's like, that's a complete distorted way, and, not a true or positive way to look at things. You know what I mean? We're not trying to become good Buddhists. We're not trying to become good meditators. We are trying to become better human beings, and we're not going to be flawless. Just because you hear the teachings once or read, the Four Noble Truths once, you're not going to become pretty much certain. I can say this. Maybe there's a very rare exception. You're not going to become enlightened. They're not going to become Buddha. But if you do, commit, understand the value of this path, understand that you have a desire to walk this path and continue on it, you may make a little bit of progress. And the next time you're in a similar situation, where in the past you reacted with impatience and anger and, egotistical, self-centered behavior, you may not, because you're reminded. Say, well, that is what's called practice. When you go into a situation and all these things start to push your buttons, and you remember that there's another way to experience this. There's a bigger view. Something else can happen rather than you just giving into your, impulses of feeling threatened, ego, expectations and all that. And something else can happen. This bigger experience can happen. And I'm not sure what that is yet. I'm not going to say what it is. I don't know what it is. For you, it's going to be one thing. For me, it's another thing. That's called practice. That's as much, maybe more of the practice than what we're about to do today, sitting and meditating. It's equally as important. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Victoria. So Victoria's going to talk a bit on her topic of choice today, and then we're going to meditate. We usually do it the opposite. We're going to do a little different today. And then we'll go to some questions. So, Victoria.
I rejoice that all of us are here to work on ourselves. And when we take refuge in our tradition, in the Drikon tradition, our very first prayer with which we start our practice sessions is, may all sentient beings, limitless space, my mothers, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they have happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly will I establish them in complete, unsurpassed, and perfect Buddhahood. So It's another version, a more advanced version for people who call themselves practitioners who have taken refuge in the Buddha Dharma with a teacher to give what is called to rouse the mind of bodhicitta. It's what we do in the four immeasurables, but it's a little bit more of a more flushed out versions of the means and the methods by which that enlightenment can happen. And obviously we are referring to enemies and obstructors, those who harm me, only when we eliminate that, not eliminating beings, but eliminating the mental states by which we classify and experience others as enemies and obstructors. When those mental states are removed and the surface of the mind, the mirror, is cleansed, can actually practice really begin, and that is generating the mind of enlightenment, that is generating the mind of compassion with which we always start. That is the intention. The intention is not for us to attain enlightenment just for ourselves. Whenever we think for doing anything for ourselves, the afflicted mind, the polluted mind of selfishness will remain. So what good will it do if we want enlightenment for ourselves when we're dragging the pollution of selfishness and ignorance that is based on dualism? Because me is always me and the other. We're dragging the polluted mind into enlightenment. There can be no enlightenment and pollution side by side. Why we start with this prayer as our first prayer after we take refuge and we do our sessions. We start with, may I liberate my enemy and install him in happiness and enlightenment. Because only when we can take a person we disliked or hate, or a situation, someone extremely difficult, and when we can dissolve our hatred, we can dissolve the mental state, our inner mental state of hatred or dislike, or all versions of hatred, being short with someone, being impatient. Those are all different degrees and temperatures of hatred or anger. Hatred is like the most intense form of anger. It can go up and down. So all these kinds of states are anger and hatred. And in its place, feel actuality of love and compassion. Only when we can take those inner states and transform them, as Michael said before, only then can we call ourselves practitioners, and we can call our activity practice. If we sit down and we say to ourselves, oh, that person makes me do that, or this person makes me do that, and we think that that's meditation or practice, because meditation is a tool for practicing. What do we practice? What do we cultivate? We are cultivating twofold things. We are cultivating love and compassion, and erasing and minimizing ignorance and afflictions. Ignorance being the self-grasping, afflictions are the arms and the legs of that ego self-grasping, because the ego is the centerpiece of ignorance. Until that moment, until we can say that we are transforming our negative afflictive states and cultivating positive states of liberation and love and compassion, because love and compassion are not emotional states. They are actually states of clarity, of our true nature emerging and unstained by the afflicted states. Compassion and the kind of love that we are invoking when we talk about practice, it is selfless love. Compassion is a completely selfless act. It's not transactional. There is no, I'll give you this if you give me this. That's afflicted mental states. So until we are working on this kind of transformation, purification, and replacement of the afflictive mental states into the selfless states of what our nature is capable of, we cannot call ourselves practitioners or call our activity practice. And until that moment, we're just shopping around for spiritual ideas, playing with them like toys. We pretend like children to be adults. We pretend to be mature practitioners, but practice is working to transform affliction. Our affliction, not anybody else's. We are all responsible only for ourselves. That's why it is so radical. Buddhism is such a radical state of where we always start and end with ourselves. The only way we know we can change others is by changing ourselves. And we'll get into it in a minute. We're not practitioners because we sit on a brocade cushion, or because we read Dharma books, or because we hear teachings from Buddha-like beings, our enlightened masters. No, we're practitioners because we practice. We practice to eliminate ignorance and the limbs of ignorance, which are the five afflictions. The five afflictions are the lenses through which ignorance and the ego experiences the world. We practice to transform afflictions and ignorance. These two things, when these are liberated, and they're not two things, they're the same thing. It's like me and my arms and my hands. You know, the sense of I and the afflicted mental states is the way we experience the world, is the way we experience the other, whether it's other beings or phenomena. We project out of our ignorance onto our experiences, and then we experience through these projections. When these two things are liberated, ignorance and afflictions, they're transmuted into freedom of selflessness, the light of wisdom, then we can say we practice, because we know that we are imprisoned by afflictions and by ignorance that does not know that enemy is our mind construct, our projection of our inner polluted state. It is nothing else than projecting our likes and dislikes and our ignorance onto the outside, and then pretending like things are there in themselves. Like that person I call my enemy is always in one mental state, like he's only that one frozen moment when he said something negative to me, and I froze in my experience and dislike of that moment. It's as if I and he are frozen statically forever in that one moment. But maybe he had a bad day that day. Maybe he lost someone. Do we ever think about things like this? When we feel sick inside, we burn inside. Whatever we touch, it too becomes ash. As it is said, apart from the power of mental imprints, phenomena do not exist. And I am reading from a book called Ancient Wisdom by Garchen Rinpoche, with a translation by a friend, Alan Wallace, who was a longtime student of Garchen Rinpoche. And the first part of the book only deals with how to transform adversity into spiritual path. We take the fuel of adversity and we can turn it into spiritual path. It's like we put gas into the tank. If we understand how to do it and what to do with it, we can use adversity as our greatest jewel. Whenever you are afflicted by sentient beings or anything else, if you habituate your mind to dwelling on suffering only, even the most insignificant circumstance will bring forth great distress. This is because whatever attitude you cultivate toward felicity and adversity, or happiness and anger, by nature grows stronger. Thus, as the power of gradual habituation increases, like we keep reiterating the story, gradual habituation increases. Eventually, virtually everything that appears will lead to misery, and there will be no possibility for happiness by not recognizing that this is due to your own mental habits. You blame this on external circumstance, and eventually the flames of hatred, evil actions, suffering, and so on spread endlessly. Thus, appearances arise as enemies. Appearances arise as enemies. Appearances are the way our mind experiences things out there. But these appearances are infused with the inner story. So appearances arise as enemies is telling us the enemy is something that comes from here. Both enemy and friend comes from here, where we condition things that we experience out there through our emotional states. Recognize, as long as you wander without self-control in the cycle of existence, the occurrence of such adversity is not an injustice or something unfair. Rather, that is the very nature of the cyclic existence. We will experience suffering every moment we bring hatred, anger, and the lesser forms, such as being impatient, frustrated, into the situation that we experience. The frustration, the impatience, the anger, it's us, it's our mental state. And when we spill that dark water into a clean glass of water, namely our experience, we pollute from the inside to the outside and vice versa. When someone says something negative to me and I experience it, I take his pollution into my clean glass of water, my inner state becomes afflicted and vice versa. This is called interdependence. I affect others by my words and my actions, just as well as they influence my inner states by their words and actions. That is why practice is working with our own inner states, making always sure that we're not spreading the disease, we're not spreading the fire, because when we are in afflicted mental states, we burn everything. There is no justified anger. There is no justified any afflictive mental state. We can only be justified when we're acting out of love and we can see the other person being afflicted, and our intention at that time of seeing that afflicted person becomes, how can I help that person? How can I put out their fire? Then we're practicing. Checking inside, honestly, we have to say to ourselves, that difficult person in my life, am I working on transforming my reaction to him or to her or to the situation? Am I working to dissolve hatred and to step out of the prison I've created myself through my polluted mental states? That's practice. Enlightenment happens when we realize our own nature, that it's all about knowing oneself, one's own mental state. We are not looking outside to anything. It's all in here. Our mind is the mirror of our world. It is our world. Our mind is our world. So whatever the surface of the mind is, if the mirror of all appearances, the place through which we see appearances, we experience everything. If that is polluted, like dirty windows, if we're looking at the world through dirty glass, what will we see? We will see nothing but dirt. We're just reflecting these polluted mental states onto ourselves. And then we say, he's horrible, she's horrible, my government is horrible. But all we're experiencing is looking through dirty window panes. We see nothing. We're just stuck in our projections, in our own pollution, in our filth. And we have to keep in mind this, that ignorance or wisdom, that choice faces us in every moment of our life. It's how we sit on the sofa. It's how we speak to people at work. It's how when we ride in the car along with others on the highway. It's in every moment. We can be polluted or clean and free every single moment. The choice is for us. It's because our life is a flow of experience. It's a river of experience. That means we are reacting and acting in every moment. So we're watching our mind every moment. Everything we do, say, or think, our body, speech, and mind continuum continues to work and is activated all the time. We're watching and practicing every moment of our existence. We even do it in sleep. Our suffering arises because we have a recurrent complaints and aggression, but there is no inner transformation. So please, let's not complain. Let's not listen to the teaching, to the Dharma, all these quotes, all these things. And then at the end in the question queue say, yes, but my mother. Yes, but my brother. Yes, but my lover. Yes, but my child. No, it isn't about them. It is about us. If we are dealing with our own states, it's the only time that we could actually like become a practitioner and say to ourselves, but how can I help them? What can I do to alleviate their situation, their suffering? Yes, they're aggressive toward me, but they're also just being swept away by the wind of ignorance and affliction, the pollution of afflictive mental states. So how can I help them remove the fire that's burning inside them? If I'm not asking myself that question, but I'm saying, well, how can I deal with that bad person? We're already out. We're already into this narrative of ignorance because we're already okay with calling them bad, calling them this, calling them that. We're okay feeling like we're so great on this side, but all the pollution is on that side. But actually, the truth of the matter, polluted states exist in interdependence. The pollution exists between me and the other person. I pollute him, he pollutes me. If I don't put an end to the inner state of pollution, there's no opportunity ever to correct and to change that pollution. If it's coming from the filth is like a two-sided filth going back and forth. We cannot call ourselves practitioners and we cannot call ourselves anything. If we're talking about they are like this is like this, my government is screwing me, without putting the emphasis on where am I? Am I polluted? Am I projecting my pollution onto them? Am I clear enough? Have I dealt with my inner pollution and ignorance to say, how can I help them? What can I do for them? We cannot talk about practice. We could just talk about blabbing and, like I said, spiritual shopping. As soon as we talk of objects, my horrible mother, we are lost to the ego trickster, the parlor tricks of the ego. This is where we have to be careful. The outer and inner periphery decides all. Talking about objects, the solid world out there, things in themselves, bad, good things are labels, is in Buddhism is the twofold ignorance, and that is the cause of samsara. It is the mud in which we're drowning now. We are simply treading the mud of afflictions and attachment if we're out there talking about things out there and not engaging our inner state. So please don't say, I know, but my mother is like this. Please don't say, I know, but my boss is like this. No, there's no such thing. We're either practicing and we're aware of the inner state and remembering that we are causing samsara to continue by being afflicted from our side. Bodhisattva practices number 20 summarizes perfectly what it is. If the enemy of our own anger is not tamed, is not subdued, subduing other enemies will only make them increase. Therefore, subduing, because we will project those endless negative mental states onto everything, and the earth will be covered with thorns and glass and shards, and everything will always be painful. But it's painful because we've never done anything to dissolve it. We're not even putting out the fire in our own little space. So how could we hope for any change? How could we hope for any happiness if all we do is place the seeds for suffering and unhappiness into the future? So subduing our own mind with the army of love and compassion, that is the way of the Bodhisattva. And most importantly is the Bodhisattva practices number 36.
This is called the 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva by Gochu Togme.
This is a daily practice that all of us should be reading day and night. And this is number 36. This is what it's the alpha and omega of all Buddhist practices. Like Michael and I were both kind of reiterating each other. In brief, wherever you are and whatever you are doing, always examine the state of your mind, our own mind. Act to accomplish the purpose of others through constant mindfulness and awareness. This is the way of the Bodhisattva. Because remember, if we are not doing that, if we are not working to transform our ignorance and afflictive emotions, even when the causes of our suffering, let's say we say our horrible mother who treated us so badly when I was 6 years old, she didn't give me that piece of candy I really wanted, she gave it to my sister. Even when the cause, the condition of our suffering is extinguished, our mother is dead for 20 years, we will still be sitting in the doctor's office talking about it, regurgitating the same unhappiness, recreating with our memories, bringing that space back to life, even though it's dead for many, many years, because we have never transformed from the inside. So we cannot hope to have any kind of happiness without the inner transformation. And with that in mind, we're going to meditate today by taking our afflictive state and using it as the instrument, as the fuel for our meditation to work on ourselves. Don't start with the most difficult of all situations in your life. Start with something where you just have an irritation, a kind of itch where you get impatient, where someone acts to you as a trigger. And all that means is that it's a situation with which you've never dealt. And so today we're going to bring that situation to mind in our meditation so that we can observe our inner mental state. And staying with it is uncomfortable, but it is the only moment when practice happens, when we know our difficult mental states and we can stay with them, we can be patient, we can have forbearance, we can have wisdom, we can see them also dissolve once they start to soften and dissolve. Because remember, impermanence, things come and go unless we're forcing them to stay there as these permanent patches in the sky. They will dissolve like clouds in the sky. Then softly start to transition and ask yourself, what can I do for that person? How can I change that situation? How can I bring the fire down? First, bring the fire down in yourself, and then be creative, figure out. The answer will come to you. When you ask questions during meditation time, all the answers will emerge on their own. You don't have to go very far. It's simple. It's about simplicity. Just find the love. When the wind of anger is gone and died down, when the fire dies down, in the next moment, you will know what to do to help that person who's been burnt and, etc. You'll know how to change the situation and move forward. So let's practice on that. Michael will guide us.
No, you got, because you're saying something very specific, and you should take them through that, because that's, we need to now bring that into this
Yes.
very specific practice. So
Yes.
you need to guide us through that.
Let's start with the situation that is not the peak of the most difficult situation. Let's not start with situations where we experience hatred, but let's start situations where we experience frustration. Move from experiencing the objectivity of the frustration and start to experience our inner state. And I'll speak tiny little bit during this, but let's bring up a situation like that,
for example,
to mind. Someone brushed against me in the subway and I'm still experiencing, or someone said an ugly thing to me at the office and I'm experiencing, or at school or at the store, but I don't even know that person and I'm just gonna observe my inner state. I'm gonna shift my focus onto my experience of that frustration, of me being attacked through the sound of that person. I'm going to hear the sound, and I'm going to hear it as a faint echo. I'm going to shift my attention in dissolving that sound and simply experiencing that feeling, that emotion. I'm going to continue to experience that emotion by opening a wider mental space, knowing that that emotion is a momentary event that I don't need to fixate on. I'm going to remind myself that this is simply samsara, where negative winds are blowing and moving throughout all day long, all night long. I will stay with this mental state, and I will allow it to simply dissolve, thin out like a cloud into my bigger space of my mind, into the open state of my mind in which things arise and cease. And if that event arises again as memory, I will do the same thing. I will hear the voice or see the situation and then just watch it dissolve. I will thin it out. And then I will reconnect to my spaciousness of my mind, the space where all experience takes place. I will use the moment of my frustration, of my anger or disappointment as fuel for my practice and connecting to the bigger, limitless space of my mind. I will have light and patience, and I will see the darkness of that situation dissolve. Those are just words. These are just thoughts. We cannot grasp onto them. They're not a chair. They're not a thing. Just let them dissipate by cutting the attachment. Experience a state free of this attachment and how good it feels on the inside to be without it. Next, you can move into taking this difficult person. You visualize them in front of you. And now we will ask ourselves, what can I do for that difficult person, afflicted and imprisoned and in suffering? Because only suffering spreads suffering. So now we will go from liberating our mind from suffering to the desire to benefit that person. It may be someone who brushed against you in the train, or who cut you off on the highway, or anyone that you feel you're capable of dealing with right now. You visualize that person in front of you. Exhale the wind of frustration or anger from yourself. And then you can choose to do different things to benefit that person. For example, you can do Tonglen. While visualizing that person, you will inhale their dark air. It will dissolve in your heart chakra where all the light is spread, where your mind is resting in its natural place. And you will exhale to them white, pure, pristine air, and you will purify them. You'll give them kind of like a resuscitation. You will take this negativity and you will resuscitate them again with the light. Visualize that the space between you and the person, like you can see energy, you can see air, between you and that person is now free of darkness. It is purified. There is just an exchange of light. That person smiles at you and you both vow. You vow on your side that whenever you will meet that person again in the future, you will act out of love and compassion. You will be free of affliction. Whatever they may experience will not influence you. You will have, your place will be stable in your mind, and the afflictions are not going to pollute your inner state. They will not hook you. And they too will say to the same thing to you, that they too will vow to stay unpolluted. And we can continue to do the Tonglen, taking the dark and bringing the light. Do that for as long as you need in your practice until you feel you change the energy.
Excellent.
And those are the techniques for taking difficulties upon the path. There are many techniques, but that's one of them. Very easy technique.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was great. We're going to be. Can captions be turned on? Yes, there are. On the in the Zoom toolbar, there's a closed caption option. Would this meditation go against Catholicism?
It has nothing to do with religion, because we're starting with our inner mental and emotional states. It's like we're cleaning our inside. We're cleaning the window through which we look at the world. Buddhism is not, Buddhist practice minus the ritual is not a religion of any kind, because we're working with our inner states. Nobody's coming to work on us. We're not following anyone's do this, do that precepts. We're working only with ourselves. That's why, as Michael said at the top of the class, Buddha is a name of the mind. It is like the blossoming state of our awareness. The word Buddha itself means someone who is awakened. We awaken to our pristine purity, to love and compassion. We awaken to mental states which are non-afflictive and non-polluted. So it's not against anything or anyone. We're cultivating higher mental states toward everything and everyone. So I can't see how in any way this kind of practice also kind of transcends everything that we get in any orthodox anything, where we're following precepts, we're told what to do, etc., where someone is saving us, we're moving toward some kind of a narrative at the end of the road. Here we're not moving toward the end of anything. We are moving toward being free and unpolluted. So I don't see any kind of conflict arising out of this kind of practice.
Is there way more benefit meditating in the morning instead of after a long day in the evening each day? Both are good. The morning's really good because it's it's usually quiet in the morning. It's still, you're just starting the day. You're not already kind of besieged by a million things that you have to do or information coming in. Maybe it's before you check your emails and texts. And you can kind of set yourself up for the day. So morning's very good, but also at the end of the day is good too, in a way to kind of look at how your day went. How did you practice? How did things go during the day? So both are very good.
It's exactly what Michael said. In the morning is perfect, even 10, 15 minutes, because you set your intention for the day. And at night, like Michael said, you analyze, was I good with that person? Was that interaction okay? And if you see that there were off things, because there will be off things and will be negative reactions until we attain fully liberated state of mind. That is another word for enlightenment. At that time, when you see that there were polluted states, you make a vow and you say, I will not do it again. This way, you really, next time you enter into that polluted mental state, into that state of experience with someone or something, you're more aware, you're more likely to remember, don't do that, don't go there.
I was wondering if you've heard of Sadhguru. What do you think? I actually attended a teaching of Sadhguru. I much prefer the teachings of Buddhism. Sadhguru is not a Buddhist, nor does he teach Buddhism, but I like Buddhism because it's the authentic teachers of authentic lineages are connected to that very lineage. So you are getting, this authentic teaching of the Dharma that's been passed down from teacher to student over centuries and centuries. That's the advantage of going to that kind of authentic lineage of Buddhist teachings. So, I don't. I also prefer. There's lots of people teaching spirituality and stuff, but I think we can spend our whole life going from this teacher to that teacher to that teacher and this discipline and this approach and that approach and kind of never get anywhere. There's that great saying, if you are searching for water in the desert, what's more effective, digging 1,000 holes 1 feet deep or digging one hole 1,000 feet deep? So, I prefer to stick with my, my lineage or tradition, because it's so rich and there's so much, and I only have so much time in the day and in this life. It's better to really stay and just keep going forward into this one path.
Also, just to please, for everyone to remember, Buddha was a man like us. He attained enlightenment by sitting and practice. He practiced many different methods until he came to this inner experience, which, after many years of searching, he decided, okay, he sat under a tree and he said, I'm not going to get up until I attain enlightenment, until I see the nature of my mind. So after that experience, what we have from the Buddha is not some book, do this, do that, do this, but Buddha has recorded that experience, and he wants so that we, kind of like a map, can navigate toward that experience ourselves. There is no Buddhism without self-experience of liberation. By doing it little by little by little by little, Buddhism can be very boring. It's like taking a shower every day, cleaning the surface of the mind, cleaning, sometimes many, many times a day, cleaning. And that accumulation of merit and wisdom, little by little, in all these little moments of the day, and not, that we get to the point of where liberation begins to happen. But there's no liberation through the book or through this or through, even the teacher will be like a guide, but we have to do our own liberating. We have to do our own thing. So looking for a teacher who can really help us, guide us to that experience. And that's why we stay with Buddhist teachers, because they themselves, through many, many generations, have attained enlightenment and have been guides and kind of beacons to attain the same. And also, please remember that when we are not changing on the inside. When there is no transformation, we get very bored. And because we get bored, because we're sitting and expecting for the world to become beautiful before we love it, well, good luck with that. That's not going to happen. We get bored because we don't experience inner transformation. We start to shop around for this teacher and for that teacher and for this. Well, in the meantime, we really, as Michael said, we should be digging a one hole in the desert, 1,000 feet.
Yeah, and I'm not saying this of anybody specific, but if anybody asks you for money and says, if you do this course and pay this amount of money, it's going to bring you this or that, I get very suspicious. It's different if you're going to a retreat center and get teachings there, or you're going to attend teachings for 3 days. Well, you have to, it's going to cost money for the organization to put it on, or if they're going to feed you or they're going to put you up. That's a different story. But to say you're doing like an online thing and they say it's $800 for the next 4 weeks and we're going to, teach you to be enlightened, I'd be very suspicious. What's the name of the book you were reading?
The name of the book it's Garchen Rinpoche, translated by Ellen Wallace, and it's called Ancient Wisdom. It also goes into dream yoga, meditation, and transformation.
And how do you spell his name?
Gyatrul, Gyatrul.
And for those of you who are asking for recommendations for books or beginners, on our you go to solidagoproductions.com/projects/meditation with Michael Imperioli, yes. And there's a list of teachers there.
We also read from the 37 Bodhisattva practices, which is a daily practice for us students of Garchen Rinpoche Drikung Kagyu lineage. It is a complete path. So the practices that are written in this, the 37 Bodhisattva practices, condensed into what is called a complete path, because the path is a gradual thing. The cleaning of the surface, the cleaning of the window through which we see everything and everyone happens gradually for us.
Someone's asking about the in the chat function. Nick just put up a link to the book. I would love to hear Victoria teach all the 37 practices again over the course of a couple of months. Reading them alone is much harder to relate to them. Yeah, Victoria went through all the 37 practices last year during a course of a bunch of teachings. Maybe you should do it again at some point.
And maybe we can also touch on them again. There's
also a really good book by Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche, where he goes through the 37 practices of Bodhisattva. Is very good. Okay. Does Stoicism align with Buddhism? That's a question for you. I don't even know what Stoicism is, but Victoria does.
We spoke in the previous teachings about the 6 paramitas, the 6 behaviors of the Bodhisattva. And Bodhisattva is often portrayed in Buddhist narrative as a warrior because, and it's often said that the 6 paramitas like patience, forbearance, joyful engagement, working for others, is put on as an armor. We put on the armor of patience. We put on the armor of compassion. We put on the armor of love. And hopefully those 5 paramitas get us to the 6th, which is wisdom, where we know that when we label things, we have to be very free. We have to be, have kind of a little bit of a distance with the labeling, because the labeling is just kind of a pathway for us to manipulate and move through the world, but we shouldn't be so stuck as if we know. So a Stoic quality, Stoic Western philosophers probably do touch and have some kind of a cohesive structure together with the 6 paramita teaching in Buddhism, because we need to be very strong on our side, and everything happens from us taking a certain position toward experiencing others in the world. to not pollute them, to have patience with them. And so I guess, yes, I guess Stoicism, from what I remember from Marcus Aurelius, and does have a lot of that similar type of wisdom. Because the wisdom is really just an inner thing. It's the thing of the mind. So it doesn't have to do tradition, it's not separated by tradition. We all have love. We all have hate. We all have clarity and delusion. They're preconceptual states. So obviously they come before the literature. First, we know that we have these states, and then we write about them and put them into different traditional methodology.
What do you think of Jiddu Krishnamurti? I actually read a lot of Krishnamurti before I approached Buddhism. And, what was interesting was I would read Krishnamurti and really love what he was saying. And then the book would be done and I had no practice or real path. So it only took me so far, and not very far at all in a way, although he obviously was very, learned. I think one of the things that made me gravitate toward Buddhism more is that, to me, Krishnamurti was not part of a lineage and really didn't have, that kind of the blessing of the lineage and the teacher giving this teaching to the student, and that unbroken chain, which is what Tibetan Buddhism offers. So so that's really the difference there.
And Krishnamurti always talked about oneself as one's own teacher. For example, when we took refuge, and many, many times after Rinpoche, Garchen Rinpoche always says, because there's always outer, inner, and secret levels with which we look at everything and everyone in the existence. And he always said, your secret teacher, your inner teacher is your mind. But by the time, before you get to that point, you need your outer teacher, you need your guide. And Krishnamurti really never spoke about his teachers, because when we are just beginners, without guidance, without anything, I find that all we can wind up in is more arrogance. And like Michael said, by the time the book would be over, there was no methodology to follow and avoid the pitfalls of arrogance and other four afflictions.
Can you practice too much as you bring practicing into your daily work life, specifically practicing when working with challenging colleagues in difficult meetings during stressful presentations? Is there a right balance? Well, balance between what? Practicing and then just being afflicted and being, you know what I mean? What are you saying? What's the alternative? By practice, we don't mean sitting like in meditation while you're at a, board meeting. We're saying practicing is bringing that mindful awareness and spaciousness, and being aware of how our own afflictive emotions get triggered by interacting with this situation and with these people, right? So, there's no downside to doing that. In fact, whatever you're doing is going to be much more fruitful if you're bringing this spacious awareness to it, rather than the default of being defensive, being petty, being self-centered, and all those things. So I think you have to kind of look a little bit clearer on what you're labeling practice as. How does one become a Buddhist? Well, it's actually a formal vow that you take in the presence of a teacher, of an authentic teacher, of an authentic lineage. And we're talking about the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, because I'm not versed at all in the other traditions, although they're, wonderful, I'm sure. So you take vow of refuge, saying, until I reach enlightenment, I take refuge in the three jewels, which is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Dharma is the teachings, and the Sangha is your, basically fellow Buddhists, including your fellow Buddhist students and your teacher and all that. There's a great book by Zanchar Khyentse Rinpoche. He's on that list that I said before on Solidago Productions, called What Makes You Not a Buddhist? Because very often, sometimes I ask people when we're talking about things like this, I said, oh, are you a Buddhist? They're like, well, I don't know. I kind of, that's either you are or you're not. You can be very interested in it. You can be very inspired by it. But until one actually takes refuge, you're not a Buddhist. So, you know, the key here is to find the teacher. We have a list of teachers. Most of them are still with us, still alive. You can go to their websites and see when they're giving teachings and where, and maybe attend a teaching. You can see them offer teachings on YouTube. Subscribe to their email blasts. Subscribe to their YouTube pages. This living tradition is with us now. You know, you have access to this authentic lineage of Buddha Dharma that goes back 2,500 years. These teachers are here. They're teaching. You have access to them. Use it.
And we take refuge because we are tired of the small, afflicted, selfish mind. And we take refuge in order to attain enlightenment, to liberate all sentient beings with authentic guides whose life is a demonstration of that very activity. Because at some point we start to feel that the small self-centered universe is just like a B movie, and we need to move away from that to a bigger view of the universe and ourselves.
The book, people keep asking about the book. There's a link to the book in the chat section here. Can you recommend a book for a teen?
I really wanted to speak. A couple of weeks ago, a student asked about meditation for his child, and I did do some research, and I'm sorry. And I'm sorry that I didn't speak to that, but I did find some guided meditation that was very, very similar to what we do. It was meditation on breath, acknowledging one's inner state, and then being patient with that state and seeing it dissolve. The only difference was that some of the imagery was slightly different, but the technique was exactly the same. So if you go online on YouTube, there are some really good meditational practices for kids. Just don't think of them as like storytelling hour, because think about it, in Tibet, kids as young as 3, 4, 5 years old enter monasteries and they study straight Buddha Dharma. Also, we can meditate with our children. And we don't have to alter the narrative so much, because The Sky and the Clouds is a wonderful narrative of how to observe our mind, and we should get used to authentic practice from the very, very beginning. I don't know specifically books for teenagers, but there is a lot of literature that has been written for young kids and teens on the topic of Buddhism.
Okay. I think we're going to close. We're going to close by dedicating the merit, merit. So if you think of merit as basically generating an energy of positive karma, right? So when we do a class like this, you're working on getting rid of negative emotions, getting rid of negative afflictions, trying to become some kind of positive element in the universe, right? So there's a generation of that positive karmic energy. What we want to do is dedicate that to the benefit of all beings, not just for us, because the efficacy of that positive energy stays very small and very limited and will be used up very, very, very quickly if we just keep it for ourselves, if we just think of it as ourselves. When we dedicate the merit, it's like taking a drop of water and putting it into the ocean. This little tiny drop of water is not a drop of water anymore. Once it's in the ocean, it becomes the ocean, right? It's like we're putting our money into this giant cosmic hedge fund and becoming billionaires of karmic wealth, and participating in it as will all the cosmos participate in it. And we do that by saying this word, making that intention to dedicate the merit to the benefit of all beings. And we say this prayer, which is called the dedication of merit. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated by this ocean of samsara, from this ocean of samsara, and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Thank you for coming today. Thank you to our dear producer, Nick
Nick Solidago.
Solidio, who does this, makes this possible on this Zoom using this high-tech technology, who does this um, really just for you all. He doesn't get paid for this, and he does this because he,
He's a
you know, he
bodhisattva.
loves you all and wants you to, you know, have the benefit of practice. And without him, we wouldn't be able to do this. So we're grateful. Thank you.
Enjoy practice.
See you.